Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Talent Talks Live 2020. My name's Catherine and I'm the Content and Community Manager for the Business of Data team here at Corinium. It's wonderful having you join us today. Now, if you didn't manage to make our first session, I just want to draw your attention to a few items of housekeeping. Please remember you can submit your questions to our speakers via the Q&A button on your screen. We'll do our best to get through as many as possible at the end of the session. You can also use the chat functionality to share your thoughts on the content and interact with your fellow attendees as well. Now, if you do experience any tech issues, please try refreshing your browser. If that doesn't work, please go over to my account in the platform and then help desk. Now, with all of that said and done, I'm delighted to welcome Stephen Hunt, who's the Chief Expert in Work and Technology at SAP, who will be moderating this wonderful panel. Welcome, Stephen, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks. Are you able to see me? Am I showing up? Yeah. Well, thanks. First of all, I'm really excited about this panel, this topic of remote work. I guess I'll start with just a very brief background on myself and then turn it to introduce our different panelists of this topic about how remote work is changing, and even more so, not just, the adaptation of remote work, because we've all been thinking about this a lot, but even more so where we think this is going in the future. So my background, I'm the chief expert for work and technology for SAP. My background, I'm actually a industrial organizational psychologist. And my focus at SAP is understanding the intersection between technology, employee psychology, and business performance. So how do we use technology to create more effective environments, make better decisions, more inclusive cultures, things like that. But also, how is technology changing a work environment? And obviously, remote work, if you look at this, wouldn't be possible without technology. But also technology is making it possible. It's also shaping it. And so really fascinating topic that I've been looking at. And I'm really excited about this panel is because when we were preparing for this, I was reminded of something one of our customers said to me, which was, we backed into remote work because we had to. But now, as we're looking to the future, we need to start walking towards it and thinking about how do we leverage this in a much more purposeful way. Yes, we want to come back together, but across the board, employees don't want to just commute for the sake of commuting. They want to be more intentional. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that. And with that, I want to start though with introducing our panel. So I'll start with Raghu. Maybe you tell a little bit about yourself and we'll just work through really quickly so everyone knows who's here today.
Thank you, Steve, and hello, everyone. It's good to be with you. My name is Raghu Krishnamurthy. I retired from GE. I was the Chief Human Resources Officer for GE. I spent 38 years there, retired last year. And since then, I teach at Columbia. I'm an adjunct professor at Columbia. I'm also doing my doctorate from the Wharton School. You may be familiar with that, at the University of Pennsylvania. And my research is actually based on future of work. And I've been working and researching and teaching on what does the shift mean. This has been a shape-shifting event. And I want to understand what it means for all of us going forward. So thanks for being here. And it's a pleasure to be with the other panelists as well.
Thank you. And Michelle, I'll go to you next.
Hi, I'm Michelle Braden, and I'm the Vice President of our Global Talent Development at WEX Incorporated. And if you haven't heard of WEX, we're a financial technology firm in the payments industry. So you won't see us as a consumer, but we do all the back end for travel, health, and fleet. So happy to be here.
Thanks. Sean?
Hi, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Sean Storr. I'm the VP of HR at the Dallas Regional Chamber in Dallas, Texas. And I just have to say that, the last Corinium event I attended was in person. And when I wore pajama pants there, everybody seemed to have a real challenge with it. But nobody said a word today. So, the world really has changed. But I'm going to be taking copious notes from these amazing panelists as well. So I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sean. And Rachel.
Hi all, I'm Rachel Weiss, Head of Learning and Development at Oscar Health. Really excited to be here. As I think someone just mentioned, Steve, it was such a quick turnaround to go from the office to not the office. And we were still in the middle of training, onboarding and everything. So it's been quite a challenge and I'm excited to talk about that.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we prepared 4 questions that we're going to ask, and each of the panelists is going to answer them, and we're going to just have a dialogue. Also, please, the audience, one of the great things, a positive thing about remote work is it's much easier to ask questions now, so please leverage the chat. I think when I was talking to a friend of mine, he said, when we come back to the office, he says there's 3 things that one thing we definitely will probably want to still use is the chat function. They said, sadly, we'll also want to use the remote and turn off the mute and turn off my camera function, but that's, we're going to miss that. But the first question is, and Sean, what is going well as this move to remote work? I mean, if we had told leaders, hey, let's move 100% of our workforce to 100% remote work in 2 weeks, they would have thought we were insane. But that's actually what a lot of companies have done. And, the research shows that for the most part, the wheels haven't fallen off. Some people actually prefer it. And there's a lot of positives. So, first question is, what's going well? What practices are you doing now as a result of this shift to remote work that you hope we will retain going forward?
That's a great question. And, our organization, like a lot of what we've already heard and a lot of organizations we partner with, we're an in-person place. We bring people together for events. We have over 800 members in the Dallas region, all brand names that you've heard of, household names, but that's what we do best. We have in-person events. We bring people together to handshake and meet and network. And so on, the famous or infamous Friday the 13th, March 13th, we'll always remember it. That's the day we said, all right, listening to our member organizations, listening to our region, health experts, now is the time to pull the trigger and say, it's okay to work remotely. And that took a big pivot. And luckily we have great people. We have talented people. They're dedicated, they're trustworthy. So that hasn't been the challenge. But over the course of, the first couple of months, we're feeling disconnected from our team and they're feeling disconnected from us. And so I could sing the praises of our team for hours and all the great things, but I want to focus on one thing that we quickly put into place, and it's really evolved and adapted from there. And that is a weekend or end of week happy hour. And I know you're thinking, okay, well, so everybody has a drink and they sit around and talk about the week. Not really. We got together at the beginning and said, well, let's end the week together. And there was no format. There was no agenda at the beginning of those. It was, let's get together and talk. And we did something crazy through this, and we listened to our team. And through those conversations, we identified that, it's kind of nice to have a theme. And so pretty quickly and throughout the whole summer and up until now, every Friday from 3:15 until 4 p.m. Central Time, we end the week together with a theme. And then you're given permission to not have to work after that. That's how we end our weeks together, which is brilliant. A few of those themes, which are kind of fun, that we put together, we had a pet parade. So it was kind of Westminster dog show style, where people could bring their pets, 3-legged, 4-legged, however many, 6-legged. We didn't have any 8-leggeds, thankfully. We've done a trivia, we've done some virtual scavenger hunts, but we've also done things around holidays, and it's not just all fun. We've talked about social unrest in the world. We've had some open, raw conversations where people can really just have a psychologically safe space to share. Best career advice given or received. We've talked about odd jobs, and we've had a lot of team members who have had some pretty odd jobs, which is kind of fun. Travel memorabilia. We shared things from knickknacks, souvenirs, favorite artists. But one thing that I've been really proud of recently was the blues. So through the evolution of this, we had team members who came up in a conversation, very interested in music, and they're from 5 different cities. And they talked about the blues and how the blues developed in their city. They gave some stylistic elements, and then they played a musical example. And it's something that, we're not talking about work. We can just let our proverbial hair down. Mine's always down. And just end the week together in a great place. And I feel like even though we're socially distant, we're working virtually and remotely, we know our team better than we ever did before. It's really brought us together. So that's one great example.
I think, Sean, so you said a couple of things I want to sort of highlight, I think, and that's what we're seeing is the listening, and that we are getting to know each other because we're literally bringing people in at home. And it's interesting, I'm a psychologist, there's a concept called supportive supervisory behavior, which is managing people in a way that shows you're sympathetic to the challenges that we all deal with in life. And they said a key part of that is, as a leader, role modeling yourself. Hey, I've got kids, I've got pets, I've got challenges, and making it okay to talk about stuff that isn't work related. And I think what you're illustrating is that that's really key for people feeling belonging and included. Other thoughts, other things people have done. I know, Michelle, you mentioned like virtual learning is something that had really taken off with you.
Yeah, so we had already started with we created our virtual learning strategy, but we hadn't started executing. And it was different for our organization because they were never, ever used to anything like that. And we had launched Degreed at the beginning of the year, and then we added some content and programs around it. But what happened was once we moved home, all of a sudden the adoption went up and it accelerated our whole strategy. So then we started creating things that we hadn't even thought about yet. And so it's just taken off. And I'm doing post-program interviews with people that have been through this new way of learning, this 6-month journey, and they're all excited about it. They love it. And these are the same people that said, I'd rather go to this program for a week, sit in the woods and, do all these things, than go to something like this. And now they're like, oh, well, this is really actually very good. I can learn anytime. I can share these things with my team, and they're getting it like in a drip, 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 but it's virtual. So, it's something that we're really excited about, the fact that we didn't have to really work very hard to accelerate that execution of that program.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. As you're talking about, a lot of this is mindsets. I think people are carrying a lot of assumptions with them that were based on outdated ways of working, whether it's an assumption that we have to physically be present to really learn, or that, work and life should be completely separated, to Sean's story. And it's like, it's getting to sort of rethink. Any other comments before I go to the next question? Because we're going to go from what's working to what's challenging.
Sean,
Yes, go ahead.
And what you and Sean mentioned actually makes a lot of sense. I think if you zoom out, the broader impact of this conversation is that we are starting to consider the whole person, and not just the cognitive individual that we want to bring into the organization. The recognition that you cannot leave emotions at the door, that has got to be part of your fabric. And that, I think, is a big shift. I think the one big pronounced shift is on the mental health and well-being. What physical health was 10, 20 years ago when people started recognizing going to the gym was good. Now I think the same thing is going to happen to mental health and well-being. People are recognizing that's an important part of your makeup, and you need to pay attention to that. And organizations like yourself, Michelle, are starting to look at interventions and courses that help people along the way.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I think so much of it is just saying that it's okay to be a whole person, that it's okay to talk about that. And somebody was joking that part of that, like, when you're talking to your senior exec and suddenly their child comes in and interrupts them in a call, and somebody goes, it's like People magazine used to have this, celebrities, they're just like us. It's like senior execs, they're just like us. They have kids, and it's okay to talk about that. So going on the challenges, though, because there's the positives, but there are challenges. And one of the big things that people have expressed a lot is that loss of spontaneous interaction. And I do even remember one company said we wanted to bring people back because they're like, I missed the coffee table, the coffee room conversations. And they said, yeah, but if we bring you back, you can't meet in the coffee room because you're not far enough apart. But that idea of the spontaneous interaction. And Rochelle, you were talking about this. What have you done to address this challenge of that just sort of spontaneous thing that happens in an office that doesn't happen at home if you don't make it happen?
Sure. I did want to just jump in really quickly on that last point to say that, when we've been talking about emotional intelligence, I think this has really shifted the conversation from some people who still consider some of that to be kind of the touchy-feely stuff to, no, this is actually the way that you're going to have to do your job from here on out. Like, this is good management, right? But to speak to the part around, seeing each other in the office and all of that, our company also, and my team even specifically, was very in-person driven, seeing each other every day, chatting. And so it's been quite a struggle to figure out how do we stay connected. that we've done some things on a company level that I think are really cool, like a coffee roulette. So our people experience team, you can email them and say you're interested, and they will just randomly hook you up with a couple of people somewhere in the business, and everyone gets together and has coffee and talks. That was really nice, just to see some new faces, hear about the experiences that other people are having in different locations. And then we've done a lot of, I think, the same things that others are doing. We've done trivia. We did an escape room with the team. Part of the team did that. That was fun, because you can do those virtually now. And so just thinking through, like, kind of what are the forced ways we can interact, but also to keep the humanity part of it. So I'm working right now with my people team on like a storytellers type experience, where we can get together, have some type of a theme, but everyone or whomever is interested can share, 5-minute story around that. It's to help us get to know each other better, get that human connection. But what I've found too is that when we were doing trivia games and whatnot online, we started coming up with just some of those like fun inside jokes as a team now, because, oh, remember so-and-so, it's just been really fun in that sense. So there are some positives coming out of it. It's just that this is the way it's going to be for a while, and so figuring out how can we stay connected. It's difficult.
Yeah, I think, building on that, I think that what I'd like to you said is that coffee roulette of taking advantage of the fact that we can bring people together that normally would never probably even met, right? And I think that's something that we did even in SAP, where they paired up this sort of mentoring technology, but it wasn't like a wise person teaching. It's just a chance to talk to other people. And I mean, personally, I used a chance to talk with somebody that intentionally, I said, I never would talk to somebody in your field at all, a supply chain technology professional. And it's been really powerful for that, I think. What are other things about connecting? I wish you guys are really geographically remote, you were talking about. How has this impacted you as a company in terms of being geographically distributed? Has it brought the company together, or has it changed it?
Actually, it's brought the company together, and even though we're apart. So everybody was used to seeing people in the office, but now we're in 20 some countries, and I've heard comments from senior leaders saying they never met their individuals, they never worked with certain individuals in other countries, and now all of a sudden they're their regular colleague that they're collaborating with on a daily or weekly basis, and they can access. Some of the executives, you'd have to go through the EA to get a meeting, you go to their office or you call, and now it's just, you just chat, you just do the chat, and next thing you know, you're having a conversation. It's really like the walls have all come down, and it's the great equalizer. It's just no boundaries. There are no people that we used to have a situation where we'd have whoever had the closest proximity to the executive got the most time, right? And now it's not like that at all. Now it's equal, maybe not always equal, but it's closer to equal. And so you can, you feel like you're more connected even though you're apart. It's a very strange thing, but it works. And people are more productive too. In fact, we've had someone on my team told me that she's getting so much more done now working remote because nobody's stopping by her office bothering her.
I think that's a really good, interesting point about how this is going to affect the power dynamics, that it's not based on geographically and sort of equalizes everyone. I do see we have a question, John. I say we are going to get to it about returning to the office. So keep your questions coming. I want to let the audience know that I saw that question that's actually coming up in a minute, and we'll address that. I do have a quick question. Technology obviously plays a huge role in these connections. Have you found certain technologies to be super useful, and not just Zoom in general, but like certain functions or features that when you're trying to create this connectivity, have there been certain things that people have really said, this is really helping us build these relationships?
I can jump in there. So internally, we use Microsoft Teams, but we use Zoom a lot for external events, virtual events. And of course, it's not revolutionary, but the channels, the chat, all the functions that really help to connect people together communicate very quickly have been super important for us. And on this topic too, of just the spontaneous interaction, those hallway conversations you miss, a very simple thing we did, but has been super effective as well, is we have a virtual chat, virtual cafe, which is just an opportunity. We have an Iron-based calendar. It's 30 minutes every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time. And it's not required, but if you want to pop in and say hi to somebody that you would have run into in the hallway, you would have had that spontaneous conversation. It is, it's forced fun. That's what some people call it. But it's an opportunity just to connect with somebody. Michelle, I haven't seen you. Rachel, oh, we never got to talk about such and such. Raghu, remember when we talked about this? The conversation goes anywhere. We don't police it. We trust people to just have a conversation, but it's been brilliant for us, for people who just don't get to see each other that often. So there's just one opportunity.
That's great.
And I could add to that too. We've set up virtual office hours. So like even for our learning programs for the instructors, because they're still being facilitated in some ways, parts of it, they'll have these office hours and people can just stop by if they have a question or something they want to discuss. They'll set them up for a specific time every week.
Nice. I think that, yeah, I think it's just being more intentional about it. Rachel, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say that, you know, when this happened, to your point on that fateful March 13th, Friday the 13th, we had to immediately move all of our training online, and we did it, and it was fairly smooth, I have to say. However, it really highlighted the fact that we're not optimizing for tech. We're not optimizing for being, you know, remote. And so that's kind of where I'm thinking now is how can I get my team ready? How can I get the company ready to be remote first if we have to? Because I certainly feel like at this point, anything could happen.
I think that's a good point. You're learning how to use the technology, but part of it is, you know, you do learn how to use chat and how do you take advantage of scheduling things more intentionally, which gets into something that is building off something, Rachel, you mentioned, which is, you know, emotional intelligence managers. It used to be, oh, we talk about it, but now it's like, no, this really puts a big impact on managers. And I talk to customers, and we have research that shows this too, that remote employees, the quality of remote work, the amount of stress they have, the impact of managers is so much more influential in a remote work environment. They are the human face of the organization. Managers need to be more supportive, more connected. So what skills, and you know, I know Raghu, both you and Michelle have real thoughts on this one. What are the skills managers and leaders need to develop? And when you're looking, so Michelle, as you're training, if you're thinking about training a manager for this, what are you focusing on now? What are the things managers have to get good at that they maybe didn't have to be so good at before?
Well, so the emotional intelligence is interesting because in all the years that I've done leadership development and programs, we stayed away from the touchy-feely. And don't go there, that's going to get too emotional. Now we're going right into it. And we're building a program, two programs. One is called, and using, you know, their journeys really, but one is called Leading Through Disruption, so that leaders can first deal with their own anxiety and learn to foster tolerance and then start helping their teams. And then the second one is Surviving Disruption, and that's for the employees. So it's ways that they can get some support that they normally we wouldn't have had in these programs. And we're not testing them. We're not going to say you have to do this before you can do that. And it's not anything like it's. We are recommending it. People would love it to be mandatory, but I don't know that you can actually make something like that mandatory. But you know, it started with doing, back in March, we were doing work from home panels, and people had never done this. So we're showing our offices and what kind of chair to get, and you know, how to set up your monitor and things like that. And then I think we also created a lot of live online workshops, we call them, and they were addressing different topics that people had. And one of the most popular one was, how do I get stuff done? Mm-hmm. They found they were, even though they're more productive, they're running out of time.
Yeah, I think that gets to that point, that the role of managers in sort of setting. There was a study that Qualtrics, one of the SAP companies, did, where we found that managers that set clear goals, their employees were half as stressed as employees that don't have clear goals. Because I think it does that sense of, have I done enough? I know, Raghu, you said you had some thoughts on this one. Would you?
Yeah, I think what is very clear, if you look at the surveys, employees don't feel the support from their managers. Some of them do, but 48% of the folks actually say that they don't feel the support from the managers. That's because most of the managers are used to focusing on tasks, right? Not on emotions. So a course that has been developed and now perhaps is becoming really popular is called Emotional First Aid. The reason is previously you used to outsource it, right? If you have an emotional problem, go to EAP, or worse still, go to HR. But if you are going to be the front face for the employee, you need to have the sensitivity to understand what's going on with the employee. I'll give you one example, right? A few weeks ago, one young lad in UK told me that he's actually on the autistic spectrum. And the first couple of weeks, he found it really difficult to understand the social cues. His manager picked up on it, and she called him and says, there's something wrong. You need to tell me why you're missing steps, or you're not as engaged when you should be, or over-engaged when you should not be. He confessed to her, actually, I have some problems here. And she then instituted a protocol in terms of how the team should behave. If you have a question, raise a red Post-it. If you have completed a thought, you can say, Roger. What will be small stuff that made his life easier? And he was so grateful for her recognizing, listening with her eyes, so to speak, and giving him the emotional first aid that he needed to be effective while at work. So emotional first aid is an important skill that managers need to have going forward.
That's such a good point. And it's like, for years, it seems like we downplayed middle managers. No, they're unimportant. No, let's get rid of them. Let's automate everything. But technology will never be more human than a human, right? And if technology can't care for you. Whereas, I think that role of managers increasingly is maybe showing that somebody cares for you, which only a person can do. I know, Sean, you had some thoughts on this too, and then I want to move to the last question, which is about returning to the office.
Sure, and I think you touched on it really well early on, that the trust, the listening, the understanding. I think all of those go together. My wife and I, we don't have kids. We're two big kids. We love to travel and just have fun. But my friends and my colleagues that are, frankly, I think the word is struggling with the situation, right? They have kids, their kids are there now all the time. They are trying to find the way to make a presentation. And like you mentioned, they walk in, it can be funny, but for them, it can be very difficult, very challenging. They feel embarrassed sometimes just because of, well, this is disrupting work. That, you know what? We understand. We appreciate you. We understand what you're going through, but trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and then with everything going on in the world, not just having kids at home, but again, we've gotten to know each other so much better, and to have those open, honest, raw conversations, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, and I think with Black Lives Matter and the work on that's been something where I hope we can keep those conversations at that level, because I've never seen the authenticity, which has been really positive. The last section, and we'll probably take the next 10 minutes on this, is the returning to the office. I mean, as they say, while the research shows we don't want to go back to commuting like lemmings every day, everyone wants to come back and start having human connections. So the first question I'd have on this is the strategy for returning to the office? Because one of the questions somebody asked in the audience is, some employees want to come back, other employees don't want to come back. What is your philosophy? How are you approaching that? Maybe Raghu, first in your thoughts, what are you seeing happening as we come back to the office? How do you think it should happen?
Change, Steve. I think early on in the pandemic, when people were overwhelmed, they wanted to get back to office as quickly as possible. But as they have settled down, they want the flexibility of being at home or at being at office. All surveys point to the fact that over 70% of employees want to have a combination. I think what is important for us to keep in mind is the fact that the definition of office is not the same as it used to be. And I think that's going to be, it's not going back to office is not the same as going back to work, because we are at work from home. That's number one. So I think in future, office is going to be defined by its functionality, not by its geography. Siemens, for instance, has already done that. they have said, you know what, you can choose to work from wherever you think you're the most productive that day. And it could mean co-located space. It could mean your local Starbucks. In fact, a few companies sprung up now that allows you to say, okay, I need to have an office space in a local restaurant or coffee shop, and they will fix it for you, including making sure that you have secure and private Wi-Fi. So I do believe that it shifts the definition of what an office is. It's beyond the geographical boundaries. It's more about convenience, functionality, and well-being. So we need to think about this as an office ecosystem, which includes home, but also other aspects.
I love the idea of the office ecosystem and rethinking the purpose of an office. I'm curious to Michelle, Sean, and Rachel, as you're getting into this, though, I was talking to another HR leader and they're like, yeah, we would love to do this, but some of our business leaders are like, well, but I like everyone to be around me. They said, never mind the fact the execs are never in the office, but how are you dealing with the different attitudes, I guess, to the panel in general, when you're having those conversations about, look, this is a chance for us to reimagine what an office is, but some leaders are open to that, some aren't, some employees are open. How are you dealing with the differences in opinions?
I think step one is really ensuring that everybody understands what this means, you know, that there isn't going to be the return to normal, to what Raghu was just talking about, you know, that being able to kind of work through that change management, as well as I'm sure for a lot of people, some emotional, you know, issues as well. We have opened up one of our offices just for a very small group of people. They sign up on a daily basis. And I spoke to someone who had gone in and she said, you know, it was nice to be somewhere with Wi-Fi and in a different feel, but it didn't feel like the office. It felt lonely. It felt quiet. You know, there's no food, no coffee. They closed everything down so people don't congregate. And so I think a lot of this is really just thinking through, what does it mean to go back to the office? How do we prepare people so that they're not disappointed? You know, that there are good things that we'll find in everything, but it's not going to be what you remember.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Other thoughts, Michelle?
Yeah, we're defining the ways of working at our office, and you know, it's in progress. It's always changing. When we first did the survey, much like you said, Raghu, people were like, yeah, I want to go back to the office. And then they found out that when they go back, it's not going to be the same. They can't sit in a conference room with a group of people, to be by themselves, or they have to have a mask or whatever. And then they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. Now I want to be flexible. Let me go in occasionally. And so that's where we've landed, is on flexibility. But that may change. I mean, you know, we have office buildings. And so rather than letting them sit empty, you know, figuring out ways that we can use them so that people can still go in when they need to go in. There are some people that really need to have a robust system or network, you know, because they have large spreadsheets or whatever they have to download. You can't really do that at home. So they may need that office as a space to go to occasionally. So we're still working it. And I think the key thing, though, is to be flexible on it. Not only provide flexibility to the employees, but as a corporation to be flexible in how we define this moving forward.
I think it's a great point, flexibility. And, you know, in every conference or convention, it's whatever side of the fence you sit on, whether it's Zennials ruined everything or saved everything. And I know that's a different session, but that's what I call them, because there's always one. I don't want to start that today, but it's fascinating to watch those who were very opposed to working remotely and those who were very pro working remotely. Hey, I want some flexibility. I want to be able to do this. Those on that team have now said, wow, I'm burning out because I can't turn it off. And those who said, I don't trust people to work from home, said, oh, I can get so much more done. Those are changing lanes, and it is going to be fascinating to watch. The answer is, oh, I'm sorry, we're out of time. I would tell you the answer, but I know we're running out.
We're not out of time. We have 5 minutes.
No, I'm teasing. I don't have the answer. No, that's going to be fascinating to watch.
I think one of the things you're hitting on, though, is that I've talked to a lot of customers, is that remote work, these changes affect different people so differently, depending on your job and the technology needs, depending on your home environment, depending on your natural style, that we need to really listen to people. The old era of like average engagement it's only misleading. Averages are only misleading because they're hiding the real significant variance in the experience people are having and the needs they have. There isn't any average employee anymore. And that's, I think, a big change. I think, and that's why I think we need to get much better at listening to people and making sure we're tied into them, which are all positive things. We have like 4 minutes left. I want to end with one last question for each of you, which is, as we go back, and it's a new normal, and we've had some cool ideas, emotional first aid, coffee roulette, and we're not, what is it that you'd say, let's not lose this? Because it'd be so easy to go back and people go, oh, I can't wait till 2020 is over, we can return to normal. I'm like, I don't want to go back to 2019. It wasn't that good. I want to go to a better 2021. What would be the stuff we need to keep? Each of you, just one thing to say, a year from now, I still hope we're doing this. So Raghu, maybe you go first and we'll just go around. What do we not want to lose?
I think the first 2 months when we went into the pandemic, there was a surge in humanity and compassion and empathy that actually showed up in engagement scores. I don't think we should lose that, because it humanizes this current situation, and hopefully that extends forever.
I think that's great. Michelle?
I would add to that. I think that having the managers actually care about the people on their teams and making sure, checking in with them, even if they're there physically, close to them, but it's that whole different attitude of looking at the individual rather than just the work that they're getting done.
That's great. Rachel?
Yeah, I would say that while, my team, we were all located in one space. And so we had a lot of conversations, a lot of chat, stories, fun. That one of the things that we had to push for was figuring out, how do we have fun when we're all separated? And I feel like we've actually been more intentional about that now. Like, let's sit down, let's play this game. We're not gonna, we're not talking about anything else. And so I want to keep that like regularly scheduled fun programming, I think.
Forced fun, as Sean called it.
That's what one of our employees does say that sometimes. Everybody said it beautifully. I think it's those things, whatever it is for your organization. I know what it is for ours. Whatever it is that's come up that's positive. But I do think, Raghu, back to your point, that to listen, to work together, to understand, to care about others, to show that humanity and that compassion, and not just get back to work the way that it used to be. The world's changed. We have to change with it, and I think that's the best thing we could do. So,
and keep that. Yeah, and I think, well, thank you so much to the panelists, because I just echo some of those things. I think that the intentional, when I'm talking to customers and that's saying, we used to assume that just because we sat together, we assumed we talked to each other. We didn't, and we've had customers do major technology deployments that they said went better because now we had to make sure we checked in with each other, as opposed to assume since they're sitting next to each other, they're talking, which isn't necessarily happening. So that intentionality, that caring, and that part of being a manager is about being a caring individual and learning. That doesn't mean we need to be touchy-feely, but we have to appreciate that all of us, our lives are not just, work and then life, they're combined. And I think that last point, which Raghu, I think is so powerful, that I think we forget often. The COVID, the social distancing, people didn't do this stuff because they have to, despite all the politics and stuff. People fundamentally did it because they wanted to. I don't think in the history of humanity at a global level, we've had such an outpouring of altruism where people have voluntarily made their lives more difficult, fundamentally out of the care and concern for others. And I hope that that's something that's not lost as we go back, because I think that's very powerful. So with that, I know that we are right at time. I want to thank the panelists for a fascinating conversation. Catherine, I want to thank you for bringing us all together. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Fantastic. What a brilliant panel. Thank you so much, Stephen. Yes, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have here today.